In this town, there is no argument about what happened. There is only disagreement about why nothing ever followed. If the question is asked quietly, in a diner or on a shaded porch, the answer comes without hesitation. Everyone knows who was responsible. Everyone knows how it unfolded. And everyone knows why no arrest was ever made. Officially, the case remains open. It is listed as an unsolved homicide, a death without a suspect, a file that ends without resolution. There is no conviction, no name entered into the public record as the person responsible. Unofficially, the story exists in a different form. It lives in shared understanding rather than sworn testimony. It is not written down, not preserved in court transcripts, but carried through memory and silence. In this place, certainty does not require proof. This is a story of a killing that occurred in broad daylight, in front of dozens of people, in a town where justice did not collapse with violence or outrage. It simply receded, leaving behind quiet agreement and unanswered questions. Skidmore, Missouri, is a small rural town, even by Midwestern standards. In the early 1980s, it was home to roughly 400 residents. The community was tightly knit, with long family histories and few secrets. People recognized one another's vehicles. They knew who belonged and who did not. Reputation carried weight, and history lingered. For years, one man's name dominated conversations in Skidmore: Ken Rex McElroy. According to police records, court filings, and investigative journalism, McElroy was accused of a long list of crimes over the course of his life. These included theft, assault, intimidation, arson, and statutory rape. Many accusations resulted in charges. Very few resulted in lasting convictions. Witnesses routinely changed their statements. Others refused to testify at all. McElroy understood the legal system and learned how to exploit it. He hired attorneys known for aggressive defense strategies. Witnesses later reported being followed, threatened, or watched. McElroy was known to sit in his truck outside the homes of people who accused him, sometimes for hours, saying nothing. Over time, fear became routine. By the late 1970s, McElroy was no longer just a repeat offender in the eyes of the town. He was a symbol of something deeper, a belief that the legal system could be manipulated and that certain people could act without consequence. In 1980, a dispute with a local grocer intensified that belief. Ernest Bowenkamp accused McElroy of stealing candy from his store. What might have been a minor accusation quickly escalated. According to court documents, McElroy threatened Bowenkamp repeatedly. Then one evening, Bowenkamp was shot in the neck while standing inside his store. He survived the attack. This time, authorities moved forward. McElroy was charged with attempted murder. In 1981, he was convicted, largely on Bowenkamp's testimony, and sentenced to prison. However, he was released pending appeal and allowed to return to Skidmore. That decision would prove consequential. On the morning of July 10, 1981, McElroy drove into town with his wife, Trenna, and parked his pickup truck near Skidmore's main intersection. He remained seated in the vehicle with the engine running. Across the street, inside the local Legion Hall, several residents had gathered. Some were drinking coffee. Others were discussing McElroy's presence in town. The tension that had built over years was no longer abstract. It was visible, immediate, and shared. At some point, McElroy was shot. He was struck twice. One bullet entered through the passenger side window. Another hit him from behind. He died inside his truck. His wife survived and was physically unharmed. Law enforcement arrived shortly afterward. What they encountered was unusual. Between 30 and 40 people were in positions where they could have seen or heard the shooting. Some were standing outside. Others were inside nearby buildings. Several had clear lines of sight to the truck. Not a single person claimed to have seen who fired the shots. No one reported hearing gunfire. No one provided a description. No one identified a suspect. Investigators recovered ballistic evidence indicating that more than one firearm had been used. No weapons were found. No physical evidence conclusively tied the shooting to any individual present at the scene. McElroy's wife stated she did not see who fired the shots. Others insisted they heard nothing at all. According to later reporting, Investigators quickly suspected that the lack of information was not due to confusion or poor memory. It was a result of collective silence. As the investigation continued, journalists and authors uncovered additional details. Some residents later acknowledged privately that they had witnessed the shooting. They simply chose not to speak about it. Fear played a role. So did anger. And so did exhaustion. For years, residents believed they had turned to the legal system for protection and received none. Restraining orders had not worked. Court appearances had changed nothing. Appeals delayed consequences. The town felt abandoned by the mechanisms meant to keep order. Prosecutors faced a clear limitation. Without eyewitness testimony or physical evidence that could withstand scrutiny in court, there was no viable case to pursue. Rumors circulated and certain names were quietly repeated, but suspicion could not be transformed into proof. No charges were filed. The case remained technically open, but functionally dormant. There was no single announcement marking the end of the investigation. No official declaration of defeat. Instead, the reality settled in gradually. Weeks passed, then months. No arrests followed. No indictments were issued. Skidmore adjusted to this new reality. Some residents left the town. Others remained and avoided the subject. Conversations about the shooting ended abruptly when outsiders asked questions. There were no memorials, no public statements, no formal acknowledgments. The absence itself became the message. Years later, reporters described Skidmore as a place shaped by quiet certainty and unresolved tension. People were polite, but guarded. They spoke carefully. Certain topics were avoided entirely. Ken Rex McElroy's death was one of them. Officially, his killing remains unsolved. The Missouri State Highway Patrol continues to list the case as open. No suspects have been named. No one has been convicted. Those widely believed to have been involved were never charged. Some later died. Others moved away. The silence endured. For McElroy's family, there was no trial, no verdict, no legal conclusion. For those who had lived in fear, there was no apology, no acknowledgement, no formal recognition of what they had endured. Skidmore became known not just for what happened, but for what followed. A town where public certainty collided with legal standards, where knowledge existed without testimony, where justice did not arrive through the courts, but through omission. Decades later, the story continues to raise uncomfortable questions. When the law fails to protect a community, what replaces it? And when an entire town shares the same certainty, but the legal record remains empty, what does justice truly mean? And who decides when silence becomes a final verdict?